Get ready to plunge into the electrifying world of tech news with the Next Tech Check podcast. Hosted by SmartTech Research's Mark Vena and NextCurve's Leonard Lee. This podcast offers bold insights, controversial debates, and monitors the pulse of innovation. It's the only podcast committed to keeping what's next in tech in check.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Vena, CEO and Principal Analyst of SmartTech Research, and this is Leonard Lee, Founder and Executive Analyst at NextCurve. Welcome to the Next Tech Check podcast. Today is Friday, December 15th, 2023. Good afternoon, Leonard. How are you doing down there in good old San Diego?
Yeah, doing well. Can't complain. It's actually a very beautiful day today, and it's always nice to have beautiful days in the winter.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say?
I would say that. I would agree with that. And it's actually a nice day in San Jose. We don't really, we live a plane right away. Right away from each other. But you live in paradise. I mean, San Diego is.
No, yeah. I mean, well, yeah. I was recently up in Santa Clara, as well as in Sonoma, and I only had one bad day. Actually, it was nice. Rain is nice for anyone who lives in Southern California. We like it, whether it's in Southern California or outside of Southern California. So, yeah, we had some. I had some nice days up in Northern California. So, but we're going to talk a little bit about that, right?
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff happening in Northern California.
We can always talk about the weather. We should talk about the New York Giants because they're coming back hard. But anyway, that's a different story. Let's.
I don't care unless the Padres are in the game.
Well, anyway, let us talk about. We'll do the first top. Actually, let's do. We're going to do AMD in a second, but let's talk about Marvell because you were just up here talking about the Analyst Day. You were there in person. Highlights, things that caught your eye. And go.
Yeah, actually it was my first time. I've been loosely tracking Marvell for quite some time, and last year with the whole Octeon line of accelerators for network infrastructure, specifically the RAN, they drew my interest. And, historically, they've been a bit of a smaller player, albeit a pretty bold one in the ARM compute space. But my first time in Santa Clara for their industry analyst day, which I think they've been doing for 5 years. So it was really cool to get invited and rubbed elbows with a bunch of our, analyst friends, who were all there, and or many of them were there. And to tell you the truth, I thought that they put on a great program, really compact, well executed. I thought their messaging was really cool. And as far as my key takes from the event, you couldn't help but absorb all of and get exposed to all of the AI stuff, right? I mean, Marvell's one of those companies that have been put into this basket of quote unquote AI companies that are riding the wave of the Gen AI hype. And so, when Matt Murphy got up there, when all the executives got up there, I mean, majority of what they were talking about centered around this whole AI opportunity in a data center. And so they were really touting their bets that they made, especially the CEO, Matt, on this bet on data infrastructure, right? And that being like a huge transition, if you will, or diversification away from some of, their primarily consumer focused business. So, it was AI packed and heavily Gen AI influenced.
Well, one of many. But from your perspective, because everybody we're talking to, both you and me, everyone's moving toward, AI embedded capabilities in their silicon.
Yeah.
How do they differentiate themselves? Because Marvell has been around for a long time. I mean, they do have a presence in a lot of different products, and they play in a lot of different categories. But could you give me a minute soundbite on how they differentiate themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have an interesting positioning, which is primarily centered around the interconnect, right? Whether it's inside the data center, in the rack, or now, I guess they're looking at inter data center, right? So it's the interconnect. How do you take all of these AI compute nodes and tie them together, right? And so there's been a lot of focus on the the GPU, right?
Oh,
NVIDIA GPUs being, hey, if you have well, you know what? AI computing and AI infrastructure happens to be a hell of a lot more than just the GPU, right? And so, you see actually NVIDIA talk increasingly more about interconnect, right? So they have InfiniBand, that's their proprietary. And one of the things that Marvell is doing is really kind of pushing forward Ethernet for the data center for AI computing, right? And that really is the core, I think, of their AI play, right? And so you're not seeing them, excuse me, selling GPUs or anything like that. It's really about how do we get these different nodes connected in a fast connect that fosters the low latency and massive capacity that's required to do these scale out AI workloads, such as training and developing a large language model, right? So
now, so if you were to look at their portfolio, and of course, the stuff that you saw last week, are they more concentrating on data centers, or are they looking at the edge? I mean, how would they, because you talk to Qualcomm, you get a different answer. You talk to NVIDIA, you get a different answer. We're going to talk about AMD.
Yeah. You know what? One of the things that I said on previous or in other podcasts around the Marvell event was that the situation is so fluid, right? I mean, we really don't know where Gen AI is going to go. I mean, I'm sorry, nobody really knows. Okay. Yes, there are a lot of GPUs being sold. Yes, there are a lot of hyperscalers building out AI compute infrastructure. But a lot of this is in anticipation of some kind of demand, right? Or perceived demand. And much of this infrastructure spend is in with the hyperscalers or with ISPs that are offering this capacity or these resources as a service, right? So it's not enterprises buying this stuff, right, and installing in their data centers. This is about as a service. So who knows where things are going to go? And obviously, last year, Marvell's Industry Analyst Day was all about 5G and Open RAN, right? Well, that kind of was flipped on its head, and it's really a depressed market at this time, and their numbers show it. So they de-emphasize that quite a bit, and so now data center, that's kind of where a lot of the action is happening for them. And the other diversification bet that they've been making is in automotive, right, where they're really making some good inroads into fostering or promoting Ethernet for automotive, right? And so as we look at software-defined vehicles and the zonal architectures, they're in that game, enabling the interconnect within the vehicle to make these new architectural transformations for software-defined vehicles happen. So yeah.
So was there anything that's
tricky, man?
Well, I mean, because I really want to get to the AMD topic, but is there anything that surprised you? Because what's I love about working with you is that you'll listen to the spiel, and the marketing people at the companies we work at are really good at producing really good spiel. That's a New York word. I don't know how you say it, but it's a New York word. But you really have to listen to it in its entirety, and then you can kind of parcel out the BS from the reality. So is there, and that can be both good and bad, by the way, was there anything you walked away with that says, or by the way, it was said in such a casual manner that it was a really important thing for you to talk about?
Nothing really. I mean, I think you and I and some of the more, let's say, pragmatists in our industry are kind of jaded with all the AI talk, right? Yeah. I was, the thing that I really walked away with this company is given how the markets that they play in have been so fluid and volatile, that they've been making some solid bets, actually some surprising bets in areas like photonics, that they're positioning themselves better, let's say, for the future. And I think they've demonstrated the ability to, at least on the surface, it looks like they can pivot pretty quickly, right? And it shows in their numbers when they report in their earnings. It's actually reflected there, the sort of this agility, and that's one of the things I'm going to keep an eye out on for this company, because I think it's going to be a tough 2024 is not going to be an easy year for anybody. It's going to be a challenging one, and it'll be interesting to see how these guys deal with that volatility. So that there you go.
Well, and you could argue that there's been so much hype about AI, a lot of it good, a lot of it not so good, that there's so much hype going on that there at some point, is there a reckoning? Are there, and what happens when markets, over, they just exceed what the market is looking for from a need standpoint. You see fallout.
I mean, no doubt. I mean, I'm already saying, I posted this on LinkedIn. I already saw an ad from a brand, actually a pretty prominent one, claiming that they offer hallucination-free Gen AI services. So now, like, okay, so
you sure that was an LSD ad? It was an ad for LSD.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, don't even go there. But we're just at, I think, the cusp of like potentially dangerously silly things happening that are very disconnected from the realities of the technology. And it's something I've been emphasizing since the beginning of the year. You go back and you look at all my stuff on Next Curve. We're talking about that stuff today, and stuff that we will be talking about in the next 6 months. But I'm pretty sure there's going to be a pretty brutal reckoning, and that's going to happen. And so that's why I'm really interested in this company, actually, Marvell, and their ability to pivot.
Yes.
And honestly, I'll be frank with you. I've heard Matt, the CEO, on earnings call. I like his pragmatic approach. Yeah, he's not this guy that goes out and starts talking hyperbolically about markets. He's actually very cautious and measured, and that's a little bit rare out there today at the moment. Right?
Well, especially with a CEO in Silicon Valley, that's certainly a short supply.
Which, and honestly, it surprises me. And I mean, I'll have to say I like his style.
Well, let's flip to AMD, another company that's jumping into AI in a big way. I was at and they've been in the space actually for quite some time. We'll drill down into it, but you talk about CEOs that are measured and really kind of well grounded. I would put Lisa Su in that category. I mean, certainly she's riding kind of a Bronco right now, but the AMD you and I know from years ago, it was the gang that couldn't shoot straight, and now it's unbelievable how they've turned things around. And their big event last week in downtown San Jose was all completely focused on AI. It was on the data center, it was on the cloud. On the flip side, it was on the PC side. They announced a brand new lineup of Ryzen AI PCs, and they're playing it from both sides. Obviously, they have a value proposition in the data center. They showed some really interesting benchmarks, how they're outperforming very significantly NVIDIA, which NVIDIA has a reputation in the AI space for being proprietary and being expensive. And AMD is the antidote to that. And they're an industry standards type of company. They certainly operate at a value proposition, which for other people who don't know what that term means, that means we're going to charge you less money for essentially the same performance, or maybe slightly better performance. That's always been their strategy on the processor side. They're applying that value proposition, of course, now to the data center. And I must say, I mean, they have a very, very compelling capability. They announced a number of impressive design wins with Meta, Dell was up there, HP was up there because they've got close relationship with those companies.
Yeah.
And the term that I used when I kind of was doing a little bit of social media last week, they're really leading the charge on what I would call the democratization of AI. And what I mean by that is that, and you'll love this because I'm a big history buff. Supercomputers, which have been around for about 25 or 30 years, you could even go back further than that. To have a supercomputer, you had to be a country, and like they didn't have they didn't have supercomputers during the Manhattan Project. I mean, they had they had a bunch of people who had calculators, and they were very primitive calculators, but a lot of that was human input. And it took the United States government spending billions of dollars on the Manhattan Project to prove what they ended up being able to prove, to build an atomic bomb. What I'm really saying now is it's probably would be an overstatement to say any Tom and Dick and Harry can have a supercomputer. But the reality is that now companies, modestly funded companies, can have supercomputer-like capability. Yes, focused on AI, which is very, very compute oriented. And I just think that's unbelievable. Now, I think that's great. It's, again, I go back to my little mantra on AI, and that there's a lot of good about it. I'm not sure there's some groups around the world that I really don't want I don't want Hamas to have a supercomputer. I mean, that would probably be a bad thing, but they certainly are executing very, very well. I think I was impressed with again the fact that they're really going after NVIDIA and hardware. I mean, if you were to watch look at the keynotes and the presentations, NVIDIA is their customer that they're targeting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, did you get it? I mean, yeah. I think just at the moment, scarcity plays in favor of AMD, right? And if they can put something out that is performant and on par with what NVIDIA is offering, I mean, I guess the only other hurdle is just, the support for software and tooling, the whole AI development tool chain. Right. Being able to put that together and make it an attractive thing for developers is really what it then boils down to. Right. So did they talk anything about that, or was it just?
Well, again, I mean, part of this is going to be opportunistic in that, there's been such a demand for this capability for data centers who are really going hard after AI usage models, that there's been a supply shortage. I mean, there's not, and AMD, they were, Lisa was very clear. Hey, we are shipping product now. When you get someone like a Dell on stage, because Dell is not a vaporware company, they don't get excited unless there's something in the warehouse that they can ship.
Sure.
And, so I was impressed with that. The other thing I was impressed with, and it goes to the whole, how does AI kind of filter down to the PC?
Yeah.
And this whole notion of Ryzen AI chips, which are x86 compatible chips, and it meshes very nicely with what Microsoft wants to do from a Windows Vision standpoint, because Copilot now is kind of like it's the core of their operating system. If you believe all the Microsoft folks, AI is going to be everything in future versions of Windows. I think that's impressive. And the reason for that is that there still is kind of a little bit of a debate on, does the AI experience happen completely in the cloud, which data centers can perform, or can you have what is that experience like on the local level with a PC that has AI-enabled silicon? If the operating system is taking advantage of it, what kind of things can you do that reduce? That obviously has a latency advantage if you're doing it locally. And my thoughts on that, and I'd like to get yours, is I'm not sure Microsoft yet. They may be loaded for bear next year. They still haven't done a really good job of convincing consumers, hey, why do I need an AI-enabled computer? Now Copilot, they've showed some really cool things that I can using a text block. Hey, make me an image of Leonard Lee on a roller coaster with Bozo the Clown, and it will come up with a relatively reasonable inference rendering. Okay, that's kind of interesting and cool, but it's not terribly practical. If you're a content creator, it might be interesting. But I think they have a long way to go, in terms of convincing consumers that when you go out and buy a PC, you want to make sure that it's optimized for AI capability. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I think, here's the odd thing. I think the uphill battle that the industry faces right now is most people don't care. I think they would like to make you think that they care. But I don't think consumers make a distinction between whether or not an AI function is delivered via a cloud-based public service like a chat GPT, or something that's a little bit more, let's say, integrated into a product like a Copilot. And that's the thing. You can't assume. I mean, there's people in a tech community, even in the analyst community, you're not even savvy at this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Knowing the distinctions between the different implementations of a generative AI technology and associated application architecture. I mean, the diversity is expanding very. It's becoming a very diverse landscape. And how do you expect consumers to understand any of this stuff? 99.9999% of them just don't care.
No.
So it's a bit of an uphill battle. I think.
And let me just add something to that.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit of cynicism when you consider the last hardware piece that people looked for when they walked into a store. It happened as recently, and I think you'd agree with this, when the first 5G phones came out, and then Apple came out with 5G. That was a thing that was on people's radar screen. Hey, I got to get a 5G phone. Yeah. It's going to take over the world. But that also, I think, exacerbated a level of skepticism, because I think you and I would agree that the way 5G rolled out in kind of a distorted type of way, there was different flavors of 5G. And there were places you couldn't get 5G, or you couldn't get the 5G service that we were all promised that was going to change the world. So that it can happen. I mean, with the right marketing message, you can drive people to buy a piece of hardware that has a specific features, but you can't disappoint them. And I
mean, it only takes one disappointment to turn a consumer off for a long time. I mean, just look at we've had this kind of similar hype and excitement around conversational AI with smart speakers. We had analysts going around saying, hey, it's going to change exactly the same thing that they were talking about generative AI. And there are generative AI folks, evangelists and, worshipers who will say, hey, no, this is different. Well, it's not turning out all that different. Yes, it's a very interesting capability, but, we already have an idea of what the AI PC is going to be.
Yes.
And that's called the Mac. It's the M series Mac. They've had a neural processor in that thing since day one with M1.
Yes.
And even though Apple gets discounted for not being an AI enough, they do plenty of AI. Just look at the new journal application, which is a really curious on-device personalization thing for the smartphone. No doubt that's going to come to, but that's an example. So we already kind of have a feel for what the AI PC is going to be like.
No, and we've got to end it here. But I agree. I agree with you 100%. I think Apple WWDC next June is going to be mind-blowing, because I think I told you before the podcast, I just got a new MacBook Pro with an M3 Max. This thing is a nuclear reactor, and it's got far more power and performance than I'll ever use. It'll come in handy when I do video and stuff like that. But there are AI embedded capabilities that Apple has not unleashed yet vis-a-vis the operating system, but little things like they have in the iPhone right now in terms of eye gaze correction. Now, that feature's been around for 2 or 3 years. Apple did a nice job of hiding it. You can't, most people don't even know this, but if you go into the settings of FaceTime, because it only works with FaceTime, it doesn't work with any other applications, it corrects your eye vision, which is why when you're looking to a FaceTime call, you look normal.
Yeah.
So, things like that, you have to have embedded AI capability to do. And we'll certainly hear more about that, but we're going to continue having this conversation. And you're exactly the right guy to do it with, Leonard, because I know you're all over this.
I know
No, but listen, thanks. It was great chatting with you as always.
Yeah,
awesome. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that the Next Tech Check podcast is part of your day or commute. Please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast, or use these convenient QR codes to connect with us. You can follow both Leonard and I on X, formerly known as Twitter, at the handles below. And until next time, have a great week. Thanks, Leonard.
Take care. Thanks.